Well, good morning, everyone. It is Gospel Tuesday, and we're coming up on the fourth Sunday of Easter. Fourth Sunday of Easter is traditionally Good Shepherd Sunday, and we have one of those passages scheduled for today, John 10. John 10, verses 1 through 10. Again, I'm reading from the Open English translation of the Scriptures, and I'm going to make another video showing you some tools, and I'll create a link for that and attach it to this video after it's made. I'll also make a note of it in the notes below. So, John 10, 1 through 10. In truth, I tell you, whoever does not go into the sheepfold through the door, but climbs up at some other place, that person is a thief, a robber. But the person who goes in through the door is the shepherd to the sheep. For him, the watchman opens the door, and the sheep listen to his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name, and he leads them out. And when he's brought them all out, he walks in front of them, and his sheep follow him, because they know his voice. They won't follow a stranger, but will run away from him, because they don't know a stranger's voice. This was a parable Jesus told them, but they didn't understand what he was talking about. Jesus continued, In truth, I tell you, I'm the door for the sheep. All who came before me were thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I'm the door. He who goes in through me will be safe, and he will go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and to kill and to destroy. I have come so that they may have life, and may have it in greater fullness. I am the good shepherd. I included verse 11. Now, the questions I have previously asked you to think about as we encountered these readings are these. What does the passage say about who Jesus is? What does it say about grace? What other questions are evoked, either questions that are challenging to me, either to learn something, or a question challenging me to change in some way? Who is Jesus? What does it say about grace? And how is it challenging me? What questions does it evoke? Now, some quick observations this morning. This passage is another example of those scriptures that should preclude any notion of God sending the pandemic as a punishment. If we're to understand God through how we understand Jesus, then God is not a destroyer, but one who tenderly cares for God's creation. And we could point to the 23rd Psalm as another passage with this very same imagery and intent and understanding about God. Second observation. This saying of Jesus is an implicit, at least, claim to be the Messiah. Anyone with ears to hear would probably hear it as much more than implicit. Sometimes people came to him saying things like, Are you the Messiah or not? Tell us plainly, yes or no. And his answer was that he had told them, and they just didn't want to hear the answer. So, how is this a messianic claim? Scriptures point to the promised Messiah as the one who would shepherd the people of God, this very image. Those same passages say that the Messiah would not be like previous shepherds. And it is this shepherding image that caused King David to be retained as the image of the ideal king, the anointed one, the shepherd of Israel. Now, was King David the perfect king? Far from it. But he was a shepherd, and those stories of the shepherd lad helped the people of Israel to anticipate another king who would be like David, only better. Now, for passages that speak to the Messiah being like a shepherd, you might also recall a text that became a setting for part of Hymnal's Messiah. He shall feed his flock. That's in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 11. It's always good to read these verses in context, but that one verse from the Common English Bible Like a shepherd, God will tend the flock. The same imagery that we find in this parable. He will gather lambs in his arms. He'll lift them onto his lap. He will gently guide the nursing ewes. King James, probably more familiar to many of us. He shall feed his flock like a shepherd, and he shall gather the lambs with his arms and carry them in his bosom, and shall gently lead those that are with young. New Century Version. He takes care of his people like a shepherd. He gathers them like lambs in his arms, carries them close to him. He gently leads the mothers of the lambs. This passage is a messianic claim. Now, for my last comment today, I would point you to the context of this gospel lesson. In chapter 9, what just went before, Jesus had just healed a man who had been born blind, and everyone was astounded. The religious authorities wanted the man to denounce Jesus as a sinner because Jesus had done this healing miracle on the Sabbath. The man refused, saying that such a judgment was not for him to make. That's up to God. But if pressed, he would suggest that no one could do what Jesus had done apart from God. Again, I invite you to read the entire passage, chapter 9 and 10. But this passage sets up a conflict between those on the one hand who believe in Jesus, those who follow him, those who see in him the agency of God, and on the other hand, those who do not, those who hear Moses as the last word, or more particularly, their interpretation of Moses, the hedge around the law. We might think today of our own conflict in the church on this very thing. This conflict, though, within Judaism, between followers of the way, the church, and the larger mainstream body of Judaism, represented in John's Gospel as the religious authorities, this has been one of the aspects of John's Gospel that has caused some scholars to think John was written later than the other Gospels, perhaps near the end of the 1st century, near the time of the Council of Jamnia, when Christians were being told to renounce Jesus or be thrust out of the synagogue, as happened with this blind man in this narrative from John. That story, however, led to the conclusion when Jesus offered a saying suggesting that he had come to heal blindness, and that those who refuse him are really demonstrating just how blind they are. People took offense because he was saying they were blind. And then our current chapter concludes, the Jews took up stones again to stone him. And Jesus replied, I've shown you many good works. For which of these are you going to stone me? He was answered, it's not for good work that you're going to do or have done that we're going to stone you, but for blasphemy, because you, being just a human, you're making yourself God. Jesus replied, if I am not doing the works of my Father, then don't believe in me. But if I do them, even though you do not believe in me, believe in the works, that you may know and understand that the Father is in me, and I in the Father. The questions I have previously asked you to consider as we are going through these readings are these. What does the passage say about who Jesus is? What does it say about grace? What questions are evoked for you? How does it challenge you? Either to learn something new, or how does it challenge you to change? Today, Gospel Tuesday. Tomorrow, First Lesson Wednesday. I'll have some hymns up in the next video. And as I said, I'll also make another short video on using some of these tools that I have suggested. So, have a good day.